Hi folks. Today we're going to take a look at how to undertake a narrative literature review. I'm going to arm you with all the knowledge that you will ever possibly need, and I will show you how I go about it, like literally what it is I do. So let's get into it. There's a few different types of literature review. At the top of this incredible pyramid that I've drawn for you, you can see the Cochrane Review. They're hard to achieve. They take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And, well, I've never done one, so I'm not going to be talking to you about that. It gets easier as you get further down the pyramid, but basically we're going to be paying our attention to the narrative literature review. There's not so many ins and outs in terms of what you have to do to demonstrate the path that got you to the literature that you appraise, and a systematic review requires that you appraise the quality, whereas we're not going to be doing that neither. So narrative review. By the way, I've published a few things in this space, different types of review, so hopefully that's going to help lead us to successful messages in this video. Right, narrative review. Why would you bother? Because it's really useful for grant applications and reports. Like, it's your quick and easy approach to figuring out what's out there in the data on your given topic. It's less systematic or rigorous than a systematic or scoping review. And it is also subject to bias and the author's knowledge, right? Like, as in me being the author of the review. Okay, step one, you need a solid research question. Make sure you've got it solid, like a rock. So I come up with my question. How have generative artificial intelligence large language models been used in higher education, teaching, and assessment? I want to know. So I use a model to help craft this question into what's going to be included and what's going to be excluded. Like, what are the bits I actually want to keep when I go and find this great body of literature. Now, there's a few different tools that can help you with this: the Pico, the PICOS, the PCOST, the Spider, etc. We're going to grab a PCOST in this example. P stands for population. So I want to figure out, what is the population here? And in this case, it's undergraduate students. They're not in medical and health sciences, they're just undergraduate students. Or I could include postgraduate students, but that opens a whole other kettle of fish. You work your way through based on your question. Keep coming back to your question, and we're going to tweak this as we go along through the literature review according to how many literature pieces, how many studies get identified through the research process, through our search, right? So if my search, according to these bits, comes out and actually it finds 3,000 articles, I'm not looking through 3,000 articles. I don't have time for that. So I'm going to refine my search terms in some way. I might refine it in terms of the types of study I include, the years that are included. Now I've got to figure out what my actual search terms will be. Set up different categories. This is literally what I do, folks. Category 1. So there I'm going to go, okay, what are all the different synonyms for generative artificial intelligence? How could I find it? Well, people might have talked about it in terms of large language models. They might have talked about it in terms of Gen AI or ChatGPT or BARD or Perplexity or whatever, so I've got to come up with a list of words that is going to get me to that part of my research question. Then next category, category 2. So I'm looking in higher education. People also call it tertiary education. And I'm going to differentiate between undergraduate and postgraduate because of that kettle of fish I mentioned earlier. Now, category 3. So there you can see I've put the little asterisks, and that means anything, any of the endings, right? Education, educate, educator, etc. teach, teaching, teacher, etc. Right, that's what that little star of happiness means. Now, I got to create my search string. Hold on tight, folks. Stay with me. It's okay. We get through this, right? So what I do, I'm literally going, okay, category 1, I want my search string to include category 1. That's the first part here. And it has to also include this other part of my research question, higher education or tertiary or undergraduate. And it also has to include educator or teacher or learning or assessment. You still with me? Okay, what's important here? Notice these bits, right? That's for when you want those terms to go together. You're only wanting it to search. You want the database to go and find stuff. I don't want everything that's been said about generative. I want everything that's been said about generative artificial intelligence, right? So if you've got multiple words that have to go together, that's when they go in here. And you got to have the bracket around your whole category. Easy. Right. Now that search string, once you've got that, then you just punch the exact same search string into your different databases. Here's an example. PubMed, right? So I chuck my string in there and it spits out 137 results, which sounds pretty fine because sometimes I put in a search and it comes up with 30,000 results. But then I look at it and go, migraine and sleep disorders? What the heck has that got to do with generative AI? Nothing. So I'm thinking maybe I need to work on my search strategy a little bit here. I know the string is solid. So what could I do to improve the stuff I'm getting churned out of this beastie? Right. So what I need to do is click on that button that says advanced and make sure that I'm only searching in title and abstract. According to the database, sometimes it'll have title, abstract, and author keywords. That's good too. So just make sure that you're getting it to turn up there and then add, then press the search button and off you go. And suddenly, hapo, I've only got 8 results and they look like they are on the money. So this is working for me. I'm getting excited in my feverishly geekish kind of way. Right, so then here's another example. Chuck it into Embase. There, I need to notice that little button. That little button will help me find my way to the title, abstract, and author keywords. Click on that and then chuck in my string and away we go. And that turned up, 9 results. Great. So some of these might be the same, some of them might be different according to the different databases and where they're gathering their literature from. Should you consider looking into Google Scholar as well? I reckon yes. But this depends on a few different things. There's a few caveats, there's a few ins and outs with this answer. Basically, I do see in published literature that people do check out the first 5 pages of Google Scholar as part of their search strategy, particularly if they are interested in finding grey literature, open access. It's only going to grab open access. It can't grab anything that's been closed access. But it can throw things up when you least expect it. So yes, check it out. Also good to support handballing or hand searching, snowballing, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, very useful. So you've done your searches. It's throwing up 9 over here, 8 over there, and then you ideally use some kind of referencing software manager like EndNote or RefWorks or Zotero or any of them, and pull them all in, and then and look, folks, I got to tell you as well, the rules are not hard and fast on this, on what you have to do for a literature review. You don't have to do the search string. I'm just telling you that's what I do because it helps. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to actually include that in your search strategy and your methods for a narrative literature review, but you do have to do it for a scoping review. In any case, I find it helpful to do because it helps me find stuff I'm looking for. So I recommend it. Right. So you got all of that, and now it's time to make sense of what you got. So keep your eye on the prize. What is the research question? Always come back to that, right? I've got to answer my research question from these 23 studies that are included, or these 16 studies, or these 52 studies, or whatever your number is, right? Like you've got to find some way of whittling down that great big body of literature into a story of this is what the literature is telling us about this topic. How many papers should you include in your review? Well, that depends on what you want to achieve. If this is an assignment, then you probably just need 10 or 20. If it's for a grant application or a report, probably 10 or 20 will do the trick. If it's for a PhD, I'd be expecting to see much more, closer to 50 or 70. And if it was for a publishable piece that is going into a journal, a peer-reviewed journal, then yeah, anywhere upwards of 30 is what I tend to see, somewhere between 30 and sort of 70. 110 is the most that I have seen, and I was impressed. So, yeah, that's what I think. You got to read your papers and figure out what the story is. And that's what you write in your results section. Now, some people include all kinds of stuff in the findings. When you write up your introduction, wait, I just got to take us back to the introduction. You might want to try the problem gap hook approach, or the statement but therefore so, or there's this great big body of literature and we're going to funnel down into the niche area that I've done this narrative review on. Yeah, there's lots of different ways of writing your introduction. Your methods. It's a great idea, I think, to demonstrate the pathway, right? Like to guide your reader through how you got there. How did you end up with these 32 papers? So that's the purpose of the methods section. Here's a search strategy that I have used, and here's how I presented it in a paper. I literally put together a table in Microsoft Word. There's the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria. Those are the databases searched. I also searched a couple of journals where I thought the information could be likely to turn up. That's a useful thing to do sometimes as well. So coming back to this story, right? Like that's what your results need to tell us. They need to tell us the story of the literature. What's the main stuff? What comes up a lot? What did you notice in these articles that you read? What kinds of things kept coming up? I look at the subheadings of the papers and go, oh yeah. How about that? That topic keeps coming up. People keep talking about pine needles or whatever it is. Some people do apply a thematic analysis. And if you're publishing your piece, then I recommend going with Brown and Clark 2013. Thematic analysis is not required for a narrative review. And also, increasingly, I'm wondering whether or not we need to consider generative AI and the influence this has on the types of strategies we have for synthesis of literature. But that's a whole other video, which I haven't done yet, but stay tuned. Okay, so you got to write up your results, sentences like, you want to compare and contrast literature, You want to be able to identify what the gaps are, what are the main themes, what are the overarching messages of the story that you're telling, that the literature is telling, and what's the sense that we can make of all of this. Something that can be quite useful in this regard in any kind of literature review is to have a data extraction table. Here's an example, and you can see down there you go with, usually these are presented in alphabetical order from the author, the first author, on that first column. That's your norm, and sometimes I'll say year and country in there as well. And then you just have as many columns as you need for the main stuff that's relevant to your field. Here's another example. In this one I did a quality appraisal. You can see there that some of these papers were awesome and some of them were okay. Here's another way of presenting the same information. Basically, you get this impression that this paper here didn't do much, right? Just came up with the goods in these kinds of key areas of the story that we're telling, the narrative. Whereas this paper here hits the mark a few more times. So maybe it's a better paper, maybe it's more useful. These two, this one here, oh yeah, Ostrom, nice one, right? That kind of stuff. So you can present the story in lots of different ways. You can have visual techniques to support the story you are telling of the overall literature you've included. Now, your discussion, don't keep discussing the literature. You've already discussed the literature. You've already synthesized it in your results. That was the whole point, right? So your discussion is moving on, like, so what? You know, like now we've found all this stuff out and we know what the story is. So what do we do with it? How do we apply it? What does this mean for? What are the next steps? What are recommendations? What are the implications for policy or for practice, etc.? So that's it. Easy, right? Those are my top tips. I'm sorry it took us so long to get there. There's a lot of caveats to pretty much everything I just said, but I hope very much that this will help guide you towards successful outcomes with your narrative literature reviews.